Well, hello again, everybody. It's Sunday. We are always doing these broadcasts on a Sunday from the Yoda Guy movie exhibit here in St. Martin. We're part of the Folly Star Foundation, which I founded years ago to try and encourage young people to follow their dreams and be all they can be. So today's video is about Star Wars. I don't know how we can really go wrong with Star Wars. It doesn't really matter what Star Wars film we're talking about. It's going to have a following and it's going to have an opinion. Whether you love it, whether you hate it, isn't really what's relevant. Today, we've got the video when we had Colin Goudie, the editor of Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. And Colin really gives us it's packed full of insights about Lucasfilm, about how Rogue One was made, about how the story came about, and all the different people that were involved in developing that. It's an insight on how movie editors work and the journey that it takes to create a professional career, etc. Something like that. I'm joined by my good friend David Whiteley from the BBC, who made the documentary the Galaxy that Britain built. And for newcomers who are just watching one of these videos for the first time, let me explain. My name's Nick Maley. They call me the Yoda Guy because I contributed to making Yoda that you can see behind me. That's a perfect likeness of the screen produced Yoda for Empire Strikes Back, which is the ones that I worked on. And I made 60 odd other movies as well. I'm an author, I'm an artist, I'm a motivational speaker, and as you can see, I'm now a webcaster too. And Folly Star Foundation is designed to encourage young people and old people to live the lives they want to live and to be all they can be and not to settle for less just because that's what everybody does. Unfortunately, this economic crash that we've gone through has taken away all our income for the past 6 months. And so we've been dependent upon supporters from our Patreon page. You can see the link down here that is for our Patreon supporters. And so we started doing these StarNet events broadcasts specifically for them. And then on a Sunday, we often, through StarNet events Facebook page, we run different videos that originated as 4-hour shows that we put on for our patrons. So, well, today, as I say, this is all about Star Wars, and I'm sure that that you all want to get on with it. So I guess that's what we ought to do. There's an interview that I've got here that that we haven't run yet. Let me see if I can pull that up.
You never forget the day you get the Star Wars phone call. I'd had surgery. I was upstairs in my house and I can hear the phone ringing. And I'm trying to get down the stairs without ending up back in hospital for more surgery. Pippa Anderson, the head of post-production at Lucasfilm, she wanted to talk to me about coming on board Rogue One. She'd been told by Gareth that I was recovering from surgery and I couldn't go to Pinewood straight away. And they waited for me, which was incredible. So 4 weeks later, I was able to drive again and I drove down to Pinewood, and they wanted to talk to me about process that Gareth and I had on Monsters. They explained it's going to be, basically other editors. There'll be a studio, effectively like, an editor that they want, sort of studio editor, which is somebody who'd worked on a $200 million movie before, which I certainly haven't.
So you didn't just work on the movie, though, did you, Colin? I mean, you ended up getting the credits for being the actual editor of Rogue One.
That's right. So a shared credit with Jabez Olsen and with John Gilroy, and I was on it for 27 months in total. And what was interesting, of course, was it was not only multiple editors, but multi-nationalities, because Jabez is a New Zealander and John Gilroy is an American, and I was the Brit.
Lucasfilm still looked to Britain for its mix of talent, enthusiasm, and attention to detail. When Gareth made Rogue One, essentially another prequel to the first Star Wars movie, he wanted to make sure it had the true feel of the 1970s.
Gareth wanted Rogue One to be filmed traditionally the way it had been back in 1976 when they shot Star Wars at Elstree. He wanted practical sets. He didn't want massive amounts of green screen. So you're actually walking onto a set with real X-Wings. You can go over and touch the X-Wing, don't break it. And the droids are all actually really moving around. They're radio-controlled droids, and and the aliens are all people in costumes. And remember when the costume tests came in, and I got to edit all the costume tests together for lighting and things. It was mind-boggling.
Yeah, that leads us in. You've become good friends with Colin since then, I think.
Yeah, I think we've all become good friends.
And we're going to ask Colin to come and join us, and there he is.
Hi, team.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Hello, team, and hello, world.
What's the weather like in Scotland today?
It's been about 3 seasons. We haven't had snow. We have had horrendous amount of rain. So loud I couldn't sit in my conservatory to do this call. So I'm actually in my edit suite, and now it's bright sunshine. So that's Scotland for you in the summer.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna hop out a bit and grab a cup of coffee or something. But I'm going to be watching, and I'm going to come and interrupt you periodically, I'm sure. We all want to know the inside story about the making of Rogue One, which undoubtedly is the most popular of the Star Wars stories. I'm dealing with a lot of fans all the time, and that's the feedback that I get. I think that was a little unfortunate for Solo, which came out 6 months after another movie, and if you want to slap in the face trying to replace Harrison Ford is probably the way to do it. But I thought that was a good movie too. But Rogue One is definitely the most popular. And so I have friends in Puerto Rico who may well be watching right now, who have their own group called it's a costume group called the Rogue Ones.
We like that a lot. I nearly wore my Cassian jacket. My Cassian jacket is over there, but it was too hot. A rarity in Scotland is for it to be too hot, but I do have my Caspian jacket over there. And I saw your little notice at cosplay, and I thought, how far should I take this? Do I get my X-Wing helmet? Do I put on the whole suit? Well, I shouldn't do that, really. Not in a professional work environment, anyway.
Well, I have to admit, I went to London to do Star Wars Celebration Europe, where I took the first rebuild of Yoda that I did, and I succumbed. I wore the whole Jedi robe thing. It was.
I'm sure David will impress me later, but there are definitely pictures of me at Star Wars conventions in a full X-Wing pilot outfit.
There you go.
I'm going to put in now.
I'm gonna give you a bit more screen here so that we can see you a bit better by hopping out. But I'll be back. So,
okay. Now we can.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yes. Oh, there we go. Look at this. Look at this. We are. And I think I even got the BFE bit right, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
I did, because that has changed with the documentary. Well, it's lovely to see you, Colin, and thank you for joining us on Movie Magic. I think it's 4. we're on to now, Movie Magic 4, which is incredible. Before we go any further, I know you WhatsApped me a picture of your T-shirt, but can we show people what your T-shirt
is? It's actually a. Can you see that? It's Viva the Rebellion. This is my lockdown stomach.
We're not judging.
Proportions now. Fortunately, Jin still fits, but I thought that was an appropriate moment for Jin.
It's very appropriate. Now, I know that obviously, I mean, Nick's right. I mean, I'm going to be biased. I love Star Wars. I love all Star Wars. But, Rogue One, I think that there's been a lot of division with some of the new Star Wars stuff. But I think that one thing that a lot of people are very united on is the fact that people genuinely enjoy and continue to enjoy Rogue One.
Right.
It definitely has that kind of that feel, and as we said in the documentary of the 1970s, it definitely segues beautifully into A New Hope, which is, I know, is what you and the rest of the team working on that work were hoping to achieve with that.
It was John Knoll's original idea. John Knoll, who came up with the first idea for Rogue One, and people who don't know, John Knoll invented I think he was about 15 or 16 years old, and he and his brother invented Photoshop, and then John actually applied to Lucasfilm for a job to ILM. When I don't know what age he was at that point, but he got a rejection letter saying, "Thank you for your application. We don't have any job for you." Now John is he wrote the story for Rogue One. He was the visual effects supervisor for Rogue One, and he's one of the leading visual effects supervisors in the world, if not the leading one. And on his office door at Lucasfilm, he has got his original rejection letter.
Brilliant, that's great, yeah.
The first thing you see is a letter from Lucasfilm telling him why he's not good enough to get a job there.
But funny, isn't that funny how things come full circle?
And John he's the loveliest guy, and like everybody there that's at that level and that caliber. I mean, just anybody there anyway, actually. But what's interesting about the people there, there's no egos, there's no, like some of the people there, like Dennis Muren, who effectively was the person that John Knoll took over for. John Knoll took over from Dennis. Dennis worked down a couple of days a week and stuff, and so Dennis was the person behind the CGI dinosaurs in Jurassic Park and the flying ET, and countless things. So Dennis has, I think, got more Oscars than most people, but you would never know. Again, the nicest guy. None of them have got a chip on their shoulder.
Before we launch into this, I know you're very good at kind of talking about how wonderful other people are. We're here to talk about how wonderful you are. But I do remember you telling me a great story when I think there was a screening of one of the prequels or something, and you were invited, and Dennis Muren was in the screening room. Was that right?
Oh yes, so actually there was. What happened was it was slightly more Machiavellian than that. There exists a 3D version of Episode 1, which was released at the cinema. They also made a 3D version of Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, which was screened at a film festival, which was just up the road from. It was the San Rafael Film Festival, which is just up the road from Lucasfilm. Actually, between Lucasfilm and the Raj, between ILM and the Raj. And Dennis went there and gave a Q&A, and I missed it because I was working that day, and I said I would love to have seen it, and Dennis went, "But you're a HOD, head of department, just call them up and say you want to see it." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" And he goes, "Just phone up Mike and arrange it." So I make this phone call, and I go, "Hi, I'd like to screen the 3D version of Episode 2, please, because we were making Rogue in 3D." And I said, "For reference." And they were like, "What day do you want to see it?" And they gave me a day and a time. And they booked out the cinema for me at ILM, which is it's like a 1,500 seat cinema. It's huge. I mean, it's like the best cinema you've ever been to in the world kind of cinema. It's amazing, as you would imagine. And there was me. Dennis said he was going to come in on his day off to watch it with me, bless him. And I took my assistant, and then some people in the art department heard about it, like Doug Chang, who was the production designer of Episodes 1, 2, 3, Rogue One, Solo, etc., and the theme park. And Doug said, "Oh, I've never seen that. Can I come?" And I was like, "Yes." And then he phoned me up and he said, "Can I bring the art department?" And I said, "Look, I've still got 1,498 seats. Bring whoever you can." And so we sat and we watched Episode 2 in 3D. And I'm longing for the day when that is released on Blu-ray in 3D, because they were really good. Because Dennis did the 3D conversion for Jurassic Park, which, if you've never seen it, anybody that's got 3D capability TV and player, thoroughly recommend it, because it wasn't just a conversion where you take one eye and you shift it a bit, which is how they normally do it. Dennis added in extra branches on the trees when the Jeep is falling through the tree, and the rain when the T-Rex is outside. So you are completely immersed in that film. Whereas a lot of films you go to see in 3D and you think, I don't see that it's in 3D.
Yeah,
Jurassic Park, the way Spielberg directs and he moves the camera a lot, that movie is effectively shot in 3D in 2D. That makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Because he's moving around the whole time.
Underneath the chain link fence, and the kids are crawling over it in Jurassic Park, and the camera got you. It's incredible. So yeah, that was a couple of weeks into my first working.
That's not a bad working for the first couple of weeks. Anyway, and the way you came to work on Rogue, I know that your very first stuff, you were kind of helping out with the mood reel and ripping stuff and putting stuff together to kind of get a feel of what Rogue One could be like, to kind of show the execs and kind of everyone could kind of flesh out the story and how long a spaceship would take to land. And I remember Gareth telling us that you can write that down and it's only seconds, but in Star Wars that might take a minute. To actually play out on screen. And you were doing that, and that was kind of like your audition, wasn't it? And you were saying to Gareth, I could do this from home, and he was saying to you, no, they really want to see. No, I can save the money. I can stay here in the UK and cut this. And he's saying, no, you get it, Cole. Come to America. Come to America. That was the BBC and you still trying to save money. He's saying, come here.
In the BBC was actually my years working in independent films and working on films like Monsters, where we were sleeping on floors and things sometimes. And so my mindset is always, we haven't got enough money to make this film. How can I cut a corner financially? And also it was quite risky still even then for me to get back on an aeroplane back in those days. So there was a little bit of that in my head. And I did. I said, I can just, it's mood reel stuff. It's not rushes. It's not actors. It's not, there's high security stuff. I can do this from home. And he said, I want them to come out to San Francisco. I want them to fall in love with you, and I want them to offer you a job. So I did that. And so I went, it's an audition. So then I got on a plane and flew out. And and then at the end of 3 months, they offered me job as initially associate editor, and then finally became editor on the film. So so that's how we got into that. I would say with people that don't know, people want to understand what the film you're about to do is. They're like, well, what does it look like? Well, we haven't shot it yet. Well, what does it look like? So what you do is you go to the closest thing you can, which is other films that have already been made, and you cut them all together, and you say, we want it to look like this. And then they can go, and also that then helps people, not just the people that are going to give you $200 million. It helps the people in art department like Nick, and you say, we want the creatures to look not this exactly, but this kind of creature, not that kind of creature. So it starts to give people ideas throughout departments in terms of color palette, and in terms of visual effects, and in terms of creature builds, and all those things.
And I know that you had, let's face it, I mean, you're a massive Star Wars fan, so to be there in the edit suite and you're seeing the rushes. So let's talk through some of those processes, because of course, as Nick said, a lot of people really love Rogue One. There's a lot of love. Whenever I tweet about Rogue One, it goes crazy. You see a lot of people still to this day love Rogue One. It's a fabulous movie. Great feel about it. But, it must have been very exciting being part of that, knowing that you are literally, I know what Gareth saying, connecting to the very first Star Wars.
Yes. What to remember is, so I started on Rogue One in 2014, which was a year and a half almost before Episode 7 came out. So none of us had seen the new films. So Episode 7 and Rogue One were both in development and production at the same time. And we didn't know if anybody was going to go and see Episode 7. And then we were going to be hot on the heels. Like a year later, we were then coming out, and then a year after us, Episode 8 was coming out. So there was these overlaps. And a lot of the crew, so obviously editorial, you stay on your one film. So I was, but Doug Chang was simultaneously across those three movies. He was on Episode 7, Rogue One, and Episode 8 simultaneously, as were some of the costume people, the creature people, the practical set build people, all doing all three movies in various stages of development. And I do remember when we were doing our little mood reel for Rogue, and then we were invited in by Kathy to come in, like 1,000 of us, into that cinema to watch the trailer for Episode 7 before it was obviously going to go out on the internet the following day. And 1,000 people, a lot of whom were working on Episode 7. We weren't, but a lot of the ILM VFX people were. And that was just like, oh, wow, these films are going to look amazing. I do remember watching that first episode 7 tease trailer.
Superb, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was incredible with the X-Wings going across the water. And
for me, I love the shot of, you see the desert and John Boyega's face, and he pops up, and you can see the panic in his face, and that he's such a fabulous actor. So he's brilliant, and
just so much with 1,000 people that are working on it.
He conveyed so much in that one.
It's only like 2 minutes long, that trailer, and it ended, and Kathy went, "Do you want to watch it again?" And everybody, yes. Not sure everybody could just hit play again, but we weren't going to be able to do that.
Cool. Exactly.
Play it again for us.
It all started a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So let's see if we can get onto this here. Here we go. So this is a very young Colin Goudie. I'm sadly don't have the beard anymore, but here we go. This is film school.
So I would have been 20.
Yeah. So where did your love of film come from then? Where did it all start?
Oh, just as a kid, I literally grew up in the way that Luke Skywalker did, in a place that was the farthest spot to the bright spot from the universe, since the galaxy. So film and cinema, which for me really was television, because I grew up in the 60s, no internet. One local cinema, which the Ritz in Rushden, which would show one film a week, wasn't a multiplex. And I'd have to beg to get, because we didn't even live there. We literally lived in the middle of nowhere. So I'd have to beg my dad to drive me into the local town to watch a movie. He would never come with me, so then I'd have to beg him to come pick me up. So it was a real commitment on his part. And I just fell in love with movies, and I didn't think it was possible to work in movies. That was not the job that it is now. That there are things like media courses and film schools. That was just unheard of. Didn't know anybody working in the film industry, was from working class family. Other people in my family had not gone on to further education, so you kind of left school and did what your dad did, or you went in the military and things like that. And I was quite good at painting, and so I managed to get into art college. So I left school when I was 15, got into art college, did a foundation course which was 2 years, where one of the things they taught you in your second year was photography. And I fell in love with photography. And again, this was in the 1970s. Everybody's now got an iPhone, which will shoot incredible pictures. But we all had our parents would have had little cameras that size, and you got the prints back, which were that big. So photography was not what it is today. And so going to photography lessons there, and being able to print off prints this big, and I learned about shutter speeds and blurring motion and to capture movement and everything like that. And I fell in love with all that. And then when I left Northampton Dean College Art School, I managed to get a placement in a film school in Bournemouth, which was a 3-year course, the first year of which was stills photography, because being a film student was so expensive, you weren't allowed to start that until your second year. Because again, video on cameras didn't exist. And I remember they just bought the first student level, broadcast level video camera, and it cost £20,000. That would have bought you. I know my sister's house cost less than half of that. Her first at the same time. It was that kind of money. So they would not give that to you to go out. Of course
not. No, I suppose they had to make sure that you were committed to doing it, really, didn't they? Yeah. They weren't going to be just a bit of a flake.
Yeah. So the first year, you were allowed to take stills. And so what I did was I went to all the second and third year students who were making films, and I said, would you like a unit stills photographer so that I can get onto set? So I would do it, get onto set, take photographs. And anybody who's ever made a film, I know you have, David, knows that there's never enough crew on set to do all the things that need to be done. Even if it's as simple as taking the director a cup of tea. So as soon as you're on set, people would go, oh, Colin, can you go and hold that mic boom and hold that and stuff? And can you mark the clapperboard? And so you'd learn how to do that. They would teach you how to do it, and you'd go off and do it. And so I started to ingratiate myself with the second year students particularly. And so come the second year, for me, they were third year students by then, and they were making their graduation films. And so by then, because I'd been helping out, I've been like assistant editing in their cutting rooms, bringing them cups of tea, they let me cut their films. So I was cutting people's films in my second year, and I was directing films in my second year, which is bizarre, with third year camera operators and things. And so by the time I was always a year ahead, luckily.
Yeah, but that was the way to do it, wasn't it? You were ingratiating yourself.
Yeah, people that I that I'm hiring or that I see hired by other people is obviously you need to have a skill set. So you need to learn. And it wasn't as simple as I just made out. I did go and read every book I could on assistant editing and assistant camera. So I read the books in the library. I bought my own copies of those books and devoured them. Watched any kind of making of documentary that was on TV. So I was doing that as well as the stuff that was on the course. So you have to learn the skill set, but you also have to be incredibly lucky. That's the kind of the thing. And you can make your own luck, but only to a certain degree, and then you are in the laps of the gods. And so it was those opportunities that I was given, which was lucky, and partly because I put the time into it. And that's what I say to people is learn as much as you can so that when you're given an opportunity, you don't mess it up.
Yeah, very true.
And that opportunity can be as simple as, can you go and get the director a cup of tea?
So you got very good at making cups of tea. Now, I didn't put this in the slideshow, and it was an omission on my part. But I before we jump to when you started working out at the BBC after that, but you managed to sneak yourself onto set at Elstree.
Yeah.
You believed that you were going to get onto a sequel of Star Wars, didn't you?
Yeah, that was the thing. My best friend and I, Mike Swindle, Mike ended up as an animator on Who Framed Roger Rabbit years later. So he was at animation school, I was at film school. We'd been at school together and art college together. So, we were best buddies. And we saw Star Wars. Then we went to see Empire Strikes Back on the opening day, Odeon Leicester Square, 70 mil. Loved that movie so much. And of course it ends and you're like, no, I can't wait 3 years. What do you mean? What? I'm sorry. So we would check the trades every week and we saw a film that was being made at Elstree Studios, which is where we knew they'd made the Star Wars films. It was being produced by George Lucas. It was written by Lawrence Kasdan. It starred Harrison Ford. Clearly, this was the third Star Wars film. This was the sequel to Empire Strikes Back. And it was being filmed under this clever disguised title of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but we knew it was a Star Wars film. So I phoned up Elstree Studios and I said that I was a journalist working for the British Film, writing an article about the British film industry, and could I come and do a tour of the studios? And they agreed. And so I had to borrow a suit, get a haircut, get a briefcase, make myself look as professional as possible. And my friend Mike was like, so I said, can I bring a photographer? And they said, sure. So we borrowed a 35mm stills camera to look professional. And we went down to Elstree, and the managing director, bless him, took us around. And he took us onto the set of Green Ice, which was a big ITC movie. And he took us onto the set of this film called Raiders of the Lost Ark. And Steven Spielberg was in the Well of Souls filming snakes, and the bit when they're toppling over the edifice into the wall of the temple. They were filming that to break out. And best day of my life. But clearly, not Star Wars.
Oh, fantastic! That's great. It also gave you kind of an idea, really, didn't it? Of what was
like what a real film was like. It was like because I was a second year film student. So God knows where I had the chutzpah to do all of this, but anyway, you just did.
Well, that's great. You got the gumption, haven't you? You got the gumption. And
I did genuinely write the article, and I did get it published.
There was some level of truth there. So you've got Life at the BBC. So you are in a fantastic sweater. But this is how things were cut at the time. So of course, it's very different now. But this is cut on. Is that quarter mil?
No. So what that is? So what that was so the previous picture, by the way, was me cutting negative, because you just shoot the camera negative, and then you process that. From that, you would make a print. The editor, you would go through, you'd watch that, and you would mark the frame where you wanted to cut with your Chronograph pencil, which is a wax pencil. You chop it with a blade, and then you join it together with sellotape. And then when your film was in the shape that you wanted, it all agreed that was the finished film. You then had to go back to the original camera negative, match with the edge numbers on the end of the frame, get the correct frame, and then you would very, very delicately, because if you got this wrong, you destroyed everything. You would physically cut the original camera negative, and you would glue it together. You glue it onto black, and then you do an A roll or a B roll. That would go off to the lab, and from that, they would make your actual film print. And that's the way everything was done from back when cinema basically first started. So like 120 years ago, right up until probably on the feature. I mean, like even started like JJ shoots on film for his Star Wars films. They're still negative with those, but they don't make cut anymore. So until relatively recently, what I'm doing there is that's a roll of sound which is why it's brown. So that's a 16mm sound mag track, which would go on this. That's a Steenbeck, and so those two plates at the back nearest to me is where you put your soundtracks. So you could have two soundtracks, and nearest to the screen is one picture track because it's a 6-plate. Yeah, so you could actually have the actors talking, and you could add one other track, so maybe some music. You had tracks. You couldn't add any other vision. So if you were fading up from black, you would get your chronograph pencil, and you would get a ruler, and you'd write on it a line. So you get a line that would go like this, across the screen like this, which would signify to the producers and the director that it was a fade up, or if it was going from one shot to another, that's what a dissolve was going to be. And they wouldn't know what the dissolve was until it came back from the laboratory in your first print.
Oh, wow.
So you really knew what you were doing, and you really knew what the dissolve was going to look like before you got the lab to print it, because it cost money to do an optical.
At what point did you decide to leave dear old auntie, the BBC, and
launch BBC for 10 years? And I met my wife there, and she was an assistant editor. I was an assistant editor. And because you work insane hours when you're an assistant and when you're an editor, you never get to go home. The only chance you have to date anybody is at work. You're never going to meet anybody outside work.
That sounds familiar.
Right? So I met my wife, and we got married at the BBC. And then after she'd actually been there for 12 years, I'd been there for 10. And the BBC was undergoing structural rechanging, very similar to today. And so we took the opportunity to leave and go freelance and set ourselves up as editors in the freelance world. And I'd been editing at the BBC, so I had made some contacts. And I left, and the very first phone call I had about work was a producer-director phoned me up, and he said, we're editing this series, you've been recommended to us by one of the directors, and it's editing on Lightworks. Is that a problem? And I said, it's not a problem, that's absolutely fine. And he gave me the job, and I hung up the phone, and then I went and phone directory inquiries, and I said, can you get me a number for Lightworks? And they put me through them, and I said, hi, what's a Lightworks, and where do I learn how to use it? I have no idea.
That's right.
Anybody who's watching this who wants to get into editing and then got any money, and they want free editing software that is industry professional standard, you can download Lightworks for free. And it's the same software that people like Thelma Shoemaker uses to cut, Martin Scorsese's movies. And I paid for a course at Lightworks, which was 2 days to learn how to use the equipment, and then I started on the job.
Went from film to kind of non-linear, and what was that like for you, kind of making that?
So what would you go in between? So film, it's interesting. People always make that discrepancy erroneously. Film is non-linear. You can take any shot on the film, and you can undo the sellotape, and you can move it down the film. It's non-linear. What it is, though, is it's destructive non-linear. Once I've done that, the previous version no longer exists. So if the director said, I preferred it the way it was, you've got to remember how you had it. With videotape editing came in, that was linear. You have to put down the first shot in the film first, followed by the second shot and the third shot. You don't have to do that on film. You can be cutting the last scene first, and you can even start cutting in the middle of that scene. But on tape, you can't do that. So you certainly couldn't in those days, because it wasn't digital. And once you'd gone down a couple of generations, it was unwatchable. So you started and you laid down your first shot, and you followed on and followed on. But what was great about video editing was you could keep the previous version, and you just put that cassette in, and you watched last week's cassette, right? Then non-linear came along, and non-linear is what we will do today, which is on our laptops, and even if you've got iMovie on an iPhone, that is more complicated than any edit suite I ever did to the BBC. My edit suite at the BBC cost £250,000.
Oh my word! No way.
You spend £250,000 to buy you a lot of houses.
Yeah, it would.
£250,000 in those days would have bought you 5 flats in London. So about 3-4 million, like now. So 12 years later, I got to do Space Race. The significance of that series for me, it was a 4-part drama series. I edited 2 episodes. William Webb edited the other 2. And the visual effects designer who built that rocket in the background, because there was nothing there, was Gareth Edwards, who was doing the VFX for the BBC at the time. And Gareth and I became really good friends. And Gareth was going to Tunisia for his 30th birthday. He was 29 when he was working for me. And with me, sorry. And he
I like them for you. He's working for you.
he came back. He said, I'm going away. I can't do any VFX next week. I'm going to Tunisia for a week. I was like, great. And he came back a week later, and he had little 35mm film canisters, those transparent ones, and they had sand and rocks in them. And he said, I bought you a present. And I was like, oh, yeah, what's that? He goes, that's the sand from outside Luke's uncle's farm. And this is a rock from the canyon where R2-D2 gets shot by the Jawas. And I went, oh, my God, that is so cool. And he went, I knew you'd get it. Nobody else gets it. My girlfriend thought I was insane, but I knew you would understand the significance. And I went, of course I did. So, God, we became even closer friends.
I remember you, I think it might have been Gareth telling me this. It may be you. I can't remember that. It's all become a bit of a blur now. But when you guys are working on Space Race, he delivers some VFX for you, and then the delivery would take about 10 minutes, and then you spend 2 hours talking about Star Wars.
Yeah, it's true.
Science fiction.
Because normally, when you get VFX back from a vendor, normally it's a very to and fro process.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, I didn't kind of want that. I wanted this, and you'd explain things again, and you go through many different versions of the same shot. And Gareth would always come back, and he'd give me a shot like that, and I'd go, well, that's perfect. And he'd give me shots like that, and on the board we would have assigned the morning for VFX talk, and it would be like, let's talk about Star Wars some more.
Yeah, exactly, because you got it done. So after Space Race, you then go on to this thing, Attila.
Oh, yeah. So Gareth and I were sitting on set that day. In fact, that's me with my backpack. So Gareth was filming the big, huge battle scene at the end of Attila. And we were sitting next to one another. And that was this green screen that we'd had built for the army to fight in front of. And I could see the number of shots that Gareth was going to have to get through to get this battle scene done. But also, that green screen was so large, it was impossible to light it. It could only be lit with sunlight. So we could only film for as long as there was sun. And we're filming that scene, and the sun is setting behind us, and the shadows from the hills are starting to come up, and I can see they're going to, at some point, encroach on that green screen. We're going to have to wrap for the day before he's finished the scene. And I was sitting next to Gareth, and he was the calmest I've ever seen a director. It was absolutely incredible, given all the chaos that was going on. Like, there was a horse that was bolting with our lead actor on, and because he'd hit it with a fake sword, it clipped slightly the horse's ear, and so it was a rubber thing, but the horse had gone off, and so all this was happening. And then I'd say, what, do it without the sword. Gareth said, just do that, and I'll CGI a sword in your hand. All sorts of things were going chaotically wrong, but Gareth was completely calm, and they would do a take, and then he'd run over and go, let's do this and this, and he would explain to the actors what he wanted. He'd run back and sit in his chair next to me, and I was thinking, God, this guy's really got it together, because this was Gareth's first huge thing as a director. This was his first big thing for the BBC. And Gareth turned to me and he whispered in my ear, and he went, I thought, biggest green screen in Europe, what can possibly go wrong? And at that moment, I realised that Gareth was really bricking it. I knew he was about to lose the road. Knew he had all the stuff he needed. Exactly. But it was going to sort it all out. Just for people here who will maybe be Star Wars fans. We finished that, and then we went on to make our next film, which I know you're going to get to. But when we were doing that movie, we had a phone call in the edit suite from Rick McCallum phoning up for George Lucas. And Rick was obviously the producer of episode 1, 2, and 3. And it was like, hi, can I speak to Gareth? Yeah, it's phone call Rick McCallum. Oh, it's Rick McCallum calling for George Lucas for you. And Gareth, because they wanted Gareth to go and work on a Star Wars TV series that was going to happen. And because George had seen Attila the Hun on American TV and had been so blown away by it that he wanted to know who the director was and how they'd made it.
Guys, you start off as friends on Space Race, and he's your VFX editor, and then you do Attila. He gets the call, and then of course Gareth decides he wants to make his own science fiction. And
what's interesting is, again, to help the people that are out there who might be interested in filmmaking and think they're struggling and how to do things. So we made Attila, and it had more visual effects shots per hour than Lord of the Rings, the first Lord of the Rings film.
Amazing.
And Gareth did all those visual effects himself in his bedroom on After Effects and 3ds Max. We finished that film, Attila. It got very good reviews in the press. And then I was expecting Gareth to go on and do huge things, and the BBC wouldn't even give him an interview to do Doctor Who.
That's insane.
I could not believe, and I'm like 20 years older than Gareth, so I was, I'd been in the industry a lot longer, and I thought this was going to be his big break, and I was horrified by the way he was treated by the industry, the TV industry. So, as you quite rightly say, Gareth thought, sod that. And he went off and he made a short film in 48 hours for the London Sci-Fi Film Festival, which has this annual competition, still runs into this
Factory Farm, yeah.
And that's right, he made Factory Farmed in 2 days, shot it, did the visual effects, edited it. And the basis of that short film was that he got the money from Vertigo Films, because they were so impressed with the short, to go and make monsters. They weren't interested in the tiller. That was what was interesting. They said, that's not why we gave him the money. We gave him the money based on the short film.
That's amazing. I remember when we interviewed him, and I put this in my book. He sat there in the interview with Vertigo, and he actually wasn't sure they were being serious, because he couldn't quite believe. And they said, okay, come up with a date when you want to be filming, and when you'll be filming on that date. So he sat there and he kind of back-timed it. Thought, well, I can be filming by then. He said he hadn't got the script ready, he hadn't got anything sorted out. But he thought, right, they came up with this kind of serious date, and they went, okay, fine. And he thought, okay, they're serious. I really got to make this movie, And
I had a very similar interview with them. Gareth probably recommended me. I was called in for the interview. At that point, I'd only ever cut one other cinema-released feature film. So all my other films had all been made for TV movies. So they were 2 hours long, and they were big budget, some of them, for TV. They were bigger budget than Monsters, way bigger budget.
Yeah.
But they had not had a cinema. Yes, I'd only done one other, Man Dancing. So I'd done one cinema-released film. All my other features had been for TV. So I was, nobody on their books. I went in for the interview, and at the end of the interview, I got up and I said, well, thanks very much for seeing me. And if you could let me know, because obviously you'll be seeing other people, and I'd love to know as soon as possible. And they said, James, the producer, went, oh, no, you're cutting it. I was like, oh, okay, right. That's wonderful, thank you. And then I left and phoned Gareth, and he went, how did it go? And I went, I'm cutting it. And he went, they told you that? And I went, yeah. And he goes, oh, that must mean I am directing it. Yeah, I wasn't sure, because I wasn't sure, because I left and I was a bit confused as to whether I went it or not, because it can't have been true. But if they're hiring you to cut it, they obviously are hiring me to direct.
They must have me as the director.
He better write that script, which he never did.
No, and here we go. I mean, here you guys are. I mean, this great partnership, and I know that when you filmed this, you were on the crew as well, and very few people on the crew, very small budget, but Gareth had a semblance of a script, and it would be kind of like you would go somewhere and you try and find something interesting that was going on, and you look at the script and go, where can that fit in? And that was a kind of working things backwards, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see in the picture on the right there, so Gareth is sitting on the steps of the Mayan temple. And I'll come back to that in 2 seconds, because there is a Star Wars related story. On the right-hand side, that's me in a room in Mexico. We were in the middle of nowhere. It was like when I was growing up.
But warmer. It's warmer in Mexico.
It was warmer. We didn't even have a desk or a chair for me to work on. So there's a flight case that the camera kit came in, is the thing that my monitor's resting on. I'm sitting on the bed, and the thing to the right of that is my upturned drawer from the dressing table thing that I had. And I turned that upside down. One there and one there are on crates. And I put my keyboard, so I've got a similar kind of keyboard here right now, put my keyboard in the middle between the two. So that was me. And Gareth, on those steps, the day before we went to do the recce, we went to Carl, and Scoot and Whitney, the actors, came with us, Ian and sound recordist. And we went to the top. We climbed the steps up the pyramid, and we get to the very top. And we waited for sunset. And Gareth was standing there, and he borrowed something of mine, electronics, that he could stand there and hold it like that. We were recreating, and so we're going with this. So, as I hope most people will. So I turned to Scoot and Whitney, and they said, what are you doing? And I said, well, we're both posing, and we're making out that we're from the Rebel Alliance, and we are doing the scene when the Millennium Falcon comes in and lands, and then the one where the X-Wings will go off to attack the Death Star, because this is where it was filmed.
Yeah.
I said, you realise that the reason we made this entire movie was so we could get a permit to come here so we could take this photograph, really.
The only reason.
And they said, Scoot and Mary, he said, oh my God, we thought you were the geek. And I said, no, Gareth's the geek, but he just doesn't wear a geek t-shirt. I wear my geek, but Gareth's is too cool. So he's an undercover geek.
So this is the case you're trying to get the unit.
That's my chair. I took a chair, so I'm on my bed using my suitcase as back to a bit of a backrest.
see, you shouldn't let all these Hollywood industry guys you work with know all this now, because they'll say, hang on, why are we giving Colin Goudie all this equipment?
I was young then, and my back can take it. Can't anymore. Now I'm a bit more of a diva. I need my proper chair. So that's Gareth and I at the British Independent Film Awards, where Gareth won Best Director, and we won effectively Best Film, Best Production. So from Monsters, Gareth went off and did a little film called Godzilla.
And you were supposed to do that, weren't you? Or you were earmarked?
Gareth had talked to me about doing it, and I was hoping to do it. And again, there was going to be more than one editor, like you saw in that previous clip. But unfortunately, I had to go to hospital for surgery, and I couldn't even get on a plane. And Gareth said, "Look, we're going to do this first block, and we'll get you in as a second editor." And I was like, "Dude, I can't fly out of the country." And then because they did Godzilla overseas, so that passed me by. But he did remember who I was, fortunately, and he asked me to come and work on Rogue. For us.
So when it was being filmed, when Rogue One was being filmed, I'm trying to think. Was the desert stuff? Where was that? Not the desert stuff. The Scarif planet. Was that Mauritius? Or the Maldives? The Maldives, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Were you? I mean, I think. Do you watch the stuff coming in live as it's being shot? Is that how it works?
Yeah, you get it. So everything that Gareth's shooting on set at Pinewood, we would get, my assistants would get that usually overnight, and then in the morning they'd come in and they'd start synchronizing the sound and the picture, and then they would break it down for me and the other editors. So we could get, looking at the rushes straight away, and then when you were filming in places like Mauritius, we wouldn't get the Maldives, we wouldn't get rushes for sometimes like a week even. It would depend what they were, because the scenes at the beginning were filmed in Iceland when they're walking across the black sand planet.
Yeah.
And so that's a much closer, Iceland's a couple of hours from London, so we got those back quite quickly. And that was the very first stuff that was shot, actually, the Iceland.
So the stuff with Max Mikkelsen comes in, and you see that.
And the young Gina, so
yeah.
And she runs off. And there were some pickup shots in that which were done where she stops and she turns, she runs back. That was shot on the back lot at Pinewood. So she ran up to a blue screen, and that was all. The rest of it was all put in. Almost everything else was practical. So all those scenes in Iceland were practical, and then we CGI'd in his house on the hillside and stuff. And even some of that, when Gareth took props out, the art department.
Yeah. What was it like when you got those rushes in, Colin? When you first saw those and you were laying them out, did the reality strike then? You were cutting a Star Wars movie.
I think the day that it was actually before that. I can tell you the exact day. It was, we were doing pre-visualization, which is where you make a version of the film on a level of computer graphics like a PlayStation game.
Right.
And it's on the third floor, and they are incredible. This was the Avengers films. They work with Disney a lot, so they do pretty much anything you've seen really is third floor. Incredible previs. And we were in a meeting, and there was Gareth was there, Barry and Margot from third floor, who were the previous supervisors, and then there were the storyboard artists, John and Matt were there, and the previous team. And we were all sitting around in a meeting, open meeting, and there was a documentary camera crew filming us as well for behind the scenes. And I was at that point, I was the only editor on the show, because it was before we started filming, so we only needed one editor. That was me. And everybody was going around the room, and they were talking about the scene, discussing what we needed, discussing shots, all sorts of concepts. And I remember watching that, and to me, it was like I was at home watching the Blu-ray of Making of Lord of the Rings, where they do the behind-the-scenes stuff with Peter Jackson. And it got to a point when I suddenly thought, "Oh, I'm not watching this. I'm in this." And I'm part of it now. I'm supposed to have an opinion, and I'm supposed to speak and give an idea. And that was the moment when it actually finally came down onto my shoulders. That at that point, as the only editor, it was like, "Oh wow, I'm helping me to have an opinion."
Yeah, that's incredible.
I realised, and then after that, it was just it was just processing those rushes in one's head. How are you going to cut them, put them together? Then I'd do a cut, and I'd hand that over to Jabez. Jabez would do his pass on it. Sometimes he'd want to start from scratch. Sometimes he'd just take what I'd given him and tweak it. Other times scenes wouldn't change. It would just depend entirely on what the sequence was that I cut and what its relevance was in the film and all the rest of it. And then they started to break things down more and more. And what happened was Jabez and Gareth said, because I cut all the previs and designed some of the shots on the Edu sequence when they go to rescue Jin's father, where Cassian is going to assassinate him, basically, snipe him. And I'd cut all that, and I'd been working on that with Barry. And it was great because it was wonderful. Is I could go into Barry and I could say, that's what I'd really like, is like a shot looking up as she jumps over from here to there. And he'd just go off and they'd do it on this computer system. And it shot half an hour later. It was incredible. So it was really good. So Jabez and Gareth were like, can you just take that entire third of the movie and just go and do it and then give it back to us, you know?
Okay, so is that what happened then? You would
well, I was doing that, and then I was there's a scene when Cassian is looking through the sniper rifle telescope at Galen, and the shot they did, to me it looked like he could easily shoot him, and I was like, well, why isn't Cassian pulling the trigger? Why isn't he killing him? Got to have a reason. And of course, the point of that scene is the more he thinks about it until he finally doesn't pull the trigger. So I wanted it that at the beginning of that scene, Galen couldn't be shot because there were too many things in the way.
Yeah.
So I cut out some objects that were on the gantry and I put them right in front of Galen's head, so he wasn't getting a clean shot. It was like you could just about see his head, right? It was like, is he there? Is Galen there? So I did that, which is in the finished film. And then obviously ILM did it properly, but based on that. But they went down to Pinewood and they were doing shots on that, pickup shots for me. And they got the timing wrong. So I would walk out into the corridor outside the edit. I got my iPhone and I'd film my assistant, Rob, and I'd go, okay, step, and now motion. And he'd do the hand forward thing and all. He'd act out and I'd go, and now exit frame, and he'd leave. And because I knew the timing in my head to perfection. Yeah. And then I texted that video clip to Pinewood and I went, film that.
That's what we want. Make that one. That's great. But actually, that's great.
And Roy was down there when John was on board. John was down at Pinewood filming shots, cutaways of like gloves on the ground and all sorts of other things that he wanted as pickups for scenes. And so everybody would, but he was doing it with a proper camera crew, whereas I was doing mine on an iPhone.
Yeah, but that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's from your independent film background as well.
Yeah,
actually, you wouldn't have thought that you'd been given that kind of freedom to kind of say, right, this is what I want to do.
I would get this little fella, and in my cutting room behind me, I had a blue screen wall, and I would film this guy so I could comp him in where I wanted a stormtrooper, and then obviously ILM would do it properly. But I would just do that to sort of work out the timing on a shot sometimes of, it is going to work better with this or that, and I would do those little things. And then Michael Chung, the VFX editor, would just laugh at me because Michael's brilliant.
I would like to see your
version, and he'd
I would like to see your version with your own previous shots of your own stormtrooper. I think that's what everyone would like to see. We want to see release the Goudie cut. And
to explain to your viewers, really, is it's just to say that what you think is that when you've got all that money, that you won't be resorting to things like that, but you still do. And what was useful was I was able to bring the table all my mindset of 20 years of independent filmmaking, and then my BBC career as well. But it was like I was able to bring that to the table as my little input. And I used to sit there with John Schwartz, the co-producer, and we'd go through and try and cut out VFX shots, because every time we cut out a VFX shot, we could save money.
Yeah.
And I was used to working on movies where you would have 3 shots for the entire movie. We had, whatever it was, 3,000 probably. I don't know now. I can tell you exactly how many to this day. So all those things, there is a consideration. It's not a bottomless pit of money. And I know that some people would be making their own movies, like I have, for no money, would be going, you're taking the mick, having a laugh. But it's true. Any way you can bring something to the table that saves some money, even on a budget that high, is helpful.
Yeah. I remember Gareth saying to me that there was a wonderful moment, one of those realization moments when they were in, I think, the sound booth. He might have said it was New York, I can't remember now, when they had James Earl Jones. And he came in there. So what was it like? I mean, for you cutting Darth Vader? So on Mustafar,
so those were special, because initially there was going to be no Darth Vader in that script, but we were all like, Gareth was, Gary, the writer, Chris, everybody was like, we got to get Vader in, we got to get Vader in. Yeah. I do remember when we got the first Vader scenes in, and the actor walked slightly faster than Dave Prowse used to. So and on the computer, the Avid, and I went through and I timed how many frames it took for Darth Vader to walk. And then I slowed the shots down so that Vader walked at the same speed.
It was too fast.
And because it was too fast, and I slowed him down. And because when you slow something down, they become bigger.
Mm.
And then we did some pickups on those anyway. So in fact, in the end, I don't think that shot finally made it into the finished version because they did another shot of Vader, and by then the guy was walking. I think they might have even recast the Vader. I can't remember. I'm sure that's on the internet somewhere. I'm sure you'll be able to look that up. But if it was the same guy, he'd slowed down, and if it wasn't, the new guy was slower. So it wasn't necessary. But initially, I was that attention to detail. But with those Vader scenes, as soon as you put that James Earl Jones voice, it is so distinctive. It is incredible. It's just, Jabez, people don't know, cut all of the Hobbit films. He cut one of the Lord of the Rings films. He's worked with Peter Jackson a lot, for 20 years probably. And Jabez came up with the idea of the corridor scene with Darth Vader.
Oh yeah, and that was quite last minute. Was that quite last minute?
Was
that quite last minute, Colin? Was that quite last
minute? We filmed. Gareth was directing that scene. It was quite funny. Gareth was directing that corridor scene. John Gilroy was directing pickup shots when another unit on this just turned a bit down the road on Pinewood, right on the same stage, I think it was. And Peter Jackson was there because he's a friend of J-Bay. He came in. That was Day came in to watch. And when you talk about moments and you know things that's going to work, was standing next to the monitors. There was Gareth was there with a monitor, and I was stood there with a monitor, and J-Bay was there, and Peter Jackson came in. And we were filming, so he came in and he was sort of going. He waved at Jabez, came over, he stood next to us, and then it was a reset, and then so everything was pitch black, and Peter Jackson's looking at the monitor, pitch black. Gareth yells action, and that red lightsaber comes on, and Peter Jackson just went. And I thought, if that's impressed Peter Jackson, it's going to impress everybody, right?
Yeah, and it does. It's one of those moments, and you just go, "Oh my word." Yeah. Oh my word! This is incredible, and the way that all ends, it comes to us. And I know that Gareth's very happy that I think his cameo in that is he pulls the lever.
That's correct.
The lever.
Yeah. There are various cameos throughout the movie, but that's my favourite. Is Gareth pulling that lever down. It's Ryan Johnson and his producer, whose name's stuck in my head. They are the guys doing that when they fired the Death Star.
Right. Okay. Cool. So they were down the road doing.
Which meant then Gareth got to be in episode 8 on the scene with the AT-ATs. He's the guy.
Yeah. And they go salt. And he's sitting down next to him in there.
We had all the rushes from Star Wars, from New Hope.
Oh.
We had Dave Powell with his accent delivering the Darth Vader.
His West Country accent, his Sterling accent,
because obviously people would make fun of that now because we will become used to James Earl Jones and it's iconic. But what's interesting is how Dave Prowse was Darth Vader. That's that line that Dave Prowse used to sign. Dave Prowse is Darth Vader. And it's true because of what I just mentioned about the physicality. Without Dave's performance, he's not just wearing a suit. He is acting. He is performing the weight of those lines. And so the new people are trying to copy what Dave set up as that character physically. James Earl Jones is still doing what he has always done as a wonderful actor anyway, with his voice. But this also the weight of you have to be, and it's the same as the actor who now plays the part of Chewbacca, is that he copied what Peter Mayhew brought to that. Yeah. And it's not just the case of go put the suit on and act. People can't do it. There is a craft, and it's the same with puppeteering on Yoda. It's the same thing. Nick will tell you that. It's not just anybody can pick up control and do it. There are mannerisms. And we had a lot of mechanical creatures in our film, and it's the same thing. They brought those skill sets.
I remember you saying to us, and it made the long extended version of the Galaxy Britain built. You cut some wonderful scenes throughout the whole movie, and there's one scene that's very moving. Well, none of it's very moving, but the moving scene where we finally say goodbye to Cassian and Jyn, and they know that their time has run out. And I remember you saying that scene was shot 3 times, and there's 3 consecutive evenings.
It was out in Maldives, and he filmed that every night at sunset. They'd run down to the beach and they'd film that scene. And because that's the thing you do, is you do film scenes multiple times on multiple settings, and you try and get the best, And so what was interesting about that was I cut that scene, and then John Gilroy came in, and John took that scene and he intercut it with Vader on the Star Destroyer. And I remember Tony Gilroy, the writer, coming in. Tony was overseeing stuff, and he said, John, because John and Tony are brothers, and they've worked together for 20, 30 years. And he said, John's in to cut the scene on the beach. And I was like, oh. And he goes, yeah, no, but don't worry. He goes, John Finkley has put music over it all.
Oh, yeah.
And it's incredible. And I was like, really? And I watched it. I was like, oh my God, it's better. It's better. John had taken it and it improved it, you know? And it's interesting. So a lot of the intercuts, that whole last Scarif reel, where there's a lot of heavy intercutting, that's John Gilroy. And that's his skill set of knowing that you can have 3 or 4, you know, shots and get away to another scene and then come back. You know, and that was a real eye-opener to me. I learned so much watching what he did. And I've done that a bit in the past on films I've done, but not to the degree that John did it. He took it to a new level. For me, it was like editing masterclass to watch what he was doing. And
what was your? We're running out of time. I knew that. What was your favourite scene to cut on Rogue?
That's a good question. That's an excellent question.
Thank you. I'll take that.
Wow.
I should have asked you this in the documentary.
I tell you a scene I really love cutting because it was so complicated. Was I edited the scene where Galen gives the message to Jin on the hologram. We had to film Forrest Whitaker, right, and Felicity on set with the camera dollying. Then they had to get those rushes to me, and I had to cut all of that. And then Tony was with me, and he was writing the Galen hologram because they had to then go back and film the Galen hologram because it's not a real hologram. 3D holograms don't exist that you can film. So you actually have to film him and you have to match the camera track that is in my cut of that scene. And that's when you know to do the dolly shot around him that he's going to be at that exact moment. Because otherwise the camera's going to be behind her head and we're going to CGI in the hologram and it's going to be in the wrong part of the scene, right? It's so complicated. I'm explaining it badly.
No, I get it. And actually,
it's a complicated thing to film and to then cut and then refilm and then intercut. So that was good. And then I do remember there was this moment I was cutting that scene, and he says in the speech, he says, "I often think of you, Jin, and I think about where you are now." And then it came to me, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's obvious that you have to have that speech, and then you have to cut to the Death Star about to fire over the top." Because there are various places it seems obvious now when you watch the scene. It wasn't written that way. It wasn't obvious it was going to go there. Those things were more joined together. That was one of my doing a bit of a John Gilroy, was intercutting scenes, because I did that before John came on board. And that was the linchpin, because once I'd worked out that the Death Star's about to fire and the audience going, "Oh my God, Jin's underneath the Death Star. That's where Jin is." And the Death Star built by her dad's about to fire and kill her. So then that was the centre fulcrum. And then I worked out all the other cut points the other side of that. And then
that position,
it runs in and she's with Saw Gerrera, and I did all this ADR that I came up with, whereby you were kind of thinking, why isn't Saw Gerrera running out with them? And he has to do that thing of, I'm not coming with you. And he only did it once, vocally, and all the rest of the time she's pulling his arm, and you can't see his lips move. So I've got Forrest to record all these new lines of dialogue saying, "You must go, Jin," and all that. So I was very proud of that.
Oh wow, and that is another very, very moving thing, isn't it? And it's a pivotal moment. It's like one of those very low points that you have in movies.
Whitaker, an Oscar-winning actor, you're editing Felicity Jones, an Oscar-nominated actress, and you've got Diego Luna. I mean, every scene, to be honest, was a joy.
It's incredible.
Interesting about Rogue was we never got to test the film. The first, because it was so secret. So the first time we screened that movie in front of anybody who hadn't worked on it was 4,000 people at the premiere. And that was the moment when Gareth and I are like going, "Is it going to work?" It was me, Kate Bez, and John Gilroy all sitting together like, "Oh my God, what are we doing?" And they liked it. They did like it.
We liked it, and the audience liked it.
So that's a very...
I'm intrigued to know exactly, going back to the very beginnings of Rogue One, to what extent was the storyline laid down by Kathleen Kennedy, Disney, the people who were doing that, and to what extent was the storyline, something that Gareth sat down and worked out for himself? What were the pieces that were put in place by one that were then developed by the other?
Okay, I'll answer that quickly, but if you want the long answer, there is a YouTube video where Gary and Chris, the first 2 writers on the film, they watch the whole of Rogue One and they do an audio commentary. So you're watching them. You're not watching the film. You can line the film up with your DVD player if you wish, but basically just listen to them and they will talk you through the entire film and who wrote what and when. And that takes the whole running time of the movie. It's really worth watching. So in terms of my knowledge of it from when I came on board, John Knoll came up with the idea based on reading Crawler on episode 4. So he was like, still the plans for the Death Star? That's got to be worth a movie. John pitched that as an idea for when they were making the Star Wars TV series, which all kind of got turned over when Disney bought Lucasfilm and it was decided to make movies instead. He pitched it to Kathy. Kathy said, that's a go. They hired Gary, and I don't know if Gareth came on before Gary or vice versa, but similar sort of time. So I know then that Gary and Gareth were down at the ranch for ages, writing a story outline in consultation with John Knoll's original idea, and John had input on that as well. Because John did it wasn't just that one line. John wrote a whole treatment outline, and that's what they took and they ran with. And then you had people like Kiri Hart, who's head of story development at Lucasfilm, and Rain Roberts. She works in that department as well. And so it would be a whole pool. It was like the writing room that you would get on a TV show or sometimes on a movie. And they would throw ideas around and go, well, what about this and what about that? And so that was a whole developmental stage. And that was changing so rapidly that I came on board in, I think it was the end of September or early October 2014. I was locked in a room with the treatment that they had, which I could read but not copy. I was allowed to make notes, but that was it, because I had to then go off and do this mood reel based on that. But they had no lines of dialogue written whatsoever. It was purely scene by scene story breakdown. By the time I delivered my first version of that film to Gareth, it just showed him the first 20 minutes. He came in and he went, oh, we changed it a lot since then. Even within 2 weeks, they changed a lot. And it was constantly changing, and it was and that was how they did the whole process, right up until they got Chris came in and started doing the screenplay. One of the things I did as a writing contribution was the story, as was told, was quite dark. You know, as we all know, Rogue was. I was, I think, the only lone person ever going, are we really going to kill everybody? Mm-hmm. Because, you know, spoiler alert. And everybody's going, yeah, we are. And I was going, wow, how do we think the audience is going to respond to that? Because these are kids' films as well as, I know we all love them as adults, but a lot of people were kids when they saw them. We're going to kill everybody? Mm-hmm. And so that was set in stone very early on. And but the other thing that I brought to the table was, because I was watching the other films all the time to get the mood reel in my head, and I've watched them hundreds of times anyway as a fan, I was saying, don't forget, there's a lot of humour. They're not comedies, but there is a lot of humour. And the humour usually comes from two characters in each movie, and it's usually C-3PO and it's usually Han Solo. And those are the people that bring in comedic lines, even though if they're not delivered as jokes, the audience loves. You know, it's Han Solo cuts open, there's bad on the outside. That reduces the audience in every screening to a lot. So I did a spreadsheet of every joke in every film, and I gave Colin Goudie 5-star rating, 1 to 5, of how funny I thought it was. And a lot of time I'd even base that on my memory of watching those films in the cinema, which I used to do repeatedly. I think I saw Empire 20 times in the cinema. And so I would remember when the laugh was coming. And I would write, this was got a really good laugh. And then I sent that off to Gary and Gareth, and I said, please put some jokes in. Yeah.
And they did, didn't they? They did.
Yeah. And those jokes were being added, like Alan Tudyk came in and improv'd so many lines for K2, because his mouth doesn't move, animated, so, which means because it's a static mouth, same as C-3PO, you can put new lines of dialogue in right up until the day of the final mix.
Exactly. Doesn't matter, does
Alan would come in and he would riff and just do take after take of alternate lines for us to use. Does that help? Help with the question, Nick?
Well, kind of, yes.
No, John Knoll, Kiri Hart, Gary Whitaker, Gareth, and then as each person came in, and then massively by Tony Gilroy at the end, like a massive input, turning it more into a spy thriller-y, like accentuating the Cassian angle. We loved that character, and they wanted a reversion, and so he was writing all new scenes for Cassian. And that was my great joy, was I got to cut all of Tony's new dialogue scenes, like every one of them.
Well, it's interesting because I remember Gareth saying he had a great relationship with Kiri as well, and that's kind of where the kind of relationship started. They talked about Star Wars long before he got the gig. But I know that you're now working on other things. Obviously, you didn't just end there at the end of Rogue One. You're in hot demand as an editor, as quite rightly you should be, and you've got lots of projects on the go, and you just finished one. Can you tell us about that briefly?
I've got 3 on the go. So that's For Olivia, which is the Roald Dahl film that I've literally just finished. That's grading as we speak. today. That's the director of that, John Hay, and the composer, Debbie Wiseman. And we recorded the score during lockdown. So that was us literally the day before I went into lockdown.
Wow.
I drove, and I went into lockdown a few weeks before the government said we should. That's Chris, my assistant, with Hugh Bonneville, who plays the part of Roald Dahl.
Fantastic.
Cognition is a film which I didn't edit, but the producer-director of that film, Ravi, loves Star Wars. So I was there, so I was co-producer on that film. So Ravi had me in at script stage to give him advice on script. And then I followed it right the way through in terms of recommending VFX and VFX artists. And I could put you in touch with people that worked on Rogue. And, I was there listening to the music with him. And he did the whole score by the BBC Concert Orchestra. So even though it's a short film, we absolutely got to So there you go. It stars Andrew Scott. And so Andrew Scott is in Sherlock. And Jeremy Irvin, who was in War Horse. And this is Ravi's first, it's a short, but it's a huge visual effects tour de force. And that will be out later this year. It's going to be like a big short film.
I'm looking forward to that. And the last but by no means least, the highlight of your career.
Oh, of course.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist, Carl.
So I hope that's been insightful. And
it's been
start out. I know anybody that's interested in making their own films, the first thing to say, don't give up. I mean, Gareth was saying at one point he didn't think he'd ever make it. And at the time he was 29. Look at him now.
Yeah, all right.
And it took me most of my working career to get onto a film as big as that. I mean, Nick was very lucky, I think, because Nick's, and I are the same sort of generation. And it took me until, 2014 until I got onto a movie that my dad could go and see at the cinema.
I think you got sidetracked by the BBC.
Yeah, I did, but it was a brilliant learning curve. But it was, I don't regret a second of that. It was my apprenticeship.
Right, yeah.
I know a lot of brilliant editors who gave me incredible opportunities.
It might seem, to me, it wasn't until we did Star Wars that I would honestly say, I've gone through my period of breaking in. Now I'm there, but I'd actually been making movies for like 7 years before that.
Right.
But I was that guy working on the crowd. I was that guy that was, just trying to be given the opportunity to show what it was that I could do. And it was 7 years before that my teacher had told me I was an idiot going to work in a factory and I should give up all these crazy ideas that really I had been the turning point where I'd stuck my heels in and said, no, I'm going to prove these guys wrong. So, it was 13 years, and that might be short in comparison with your 30 or however much it was. But even then, even when we made Star Wars, I was still a junior member of the team. It was another, it was another 4 years or something before people asked me to be head of department.
I mean, I like your story, Nick, that you were talking about with the fumes.
Okay, so I made the eyes for a lot of the creatures in the cantina. In the room, there were like 5, 6 of us. On one side of the room, we had all the mixers where we were foaming latex, so that filled the room with ammonia. And on the other side of the room, we were painting the characters with toluene paint, and that filled the room as well. So we were probably all high at the time,
Because I remember one of the other things I used to do with my friend Mike, animator from Roger Rabbit, we used to make our own little sci-fi Super 8 films. And we were trying to create Jupiter, the clouds on Jupiter. So we dropped oil paints into turpentine, and we got it in a light box, and we had a light underneath and a Super 8 camera above to get a translucent effect. And then we had straws, and we would blow to get that twirling cloud on Jupiter. And we were doing that with our Anne and Janie, our respective wives, and we got high as kites in that room filming. And we got horrendous headaches the next day because of fumes, which Nick, you did on a daily basis.
Well, but we've been doing it for a while. We were kind of used to it. I think, we
had a panic track. We weren't that sophisticated. We were like Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney going, "Hey kids, let's put on a musical in the barn." We were like, we can make a sci-fi film in a 1-bedroom flat in Crouch End.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us. We really enjoyed hearing those insights from those movies. And Colin, I'll talk to you later. And of course, David, my co whatever it is, right? Whatever it is we're doing, right?
Great to see you, my friend. Take care.
Yeah, take care, my friend.
Thanks again. Thanks for having me.
So we come towards the end of another Sunday webcast, and I really hope that you enjoyed what you saw there. You know, for us, it's becoming a tradition now to do this literally every Sunday, either at 11 o'clock if we're doing a broadcast for patrons, or because those are 4 hours long and have 3 live panels, or at 12 o'clock at Starnut Events Facebook group. If we are, you know, replaying one of them, you know, the replays are good too, because we add extra things to the panels. You know, a lot of the dialogue has been tightened up, and also you know, there are extra images and various things that are popped in along the way. So it's kind of an enhanced version that you get to see. If you enjoyed, you know, if you enjoyed that, please don't forget about our Patreon group. You know, you can become a patron of the Folly Star Foundation and get to see all of the live shows if you make a you know, a $5 donation or more, if you feel comfortable with that. But we need the support, and we appreciate the support. Either way, I'm hoping that we'll get to see you again right here sometime. And until then, may the force be with you.